but we know we will. Oh yeah, yeah, 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 yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah.
Keep on. Sure.
Beloved community is formed not by the eradication of difference, but by its affirmation, by each of us claiming the identities and cultural legacies that shape who we are and how we live in the world. With these words by Bell Hooks, I welcome you to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Boulder. Happy Valentine's Day, beloved community. My name is Janet Evans, and I will be the worship leader for today's service. We welcome all at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Boulder. If you are a new visitor, please email our office manager, Amy Zen, and let us know you found us. You will find her email in the Zoom chat. Our church website has a great deal of information about the church and activities. It's also in the chat. Now, please ensure your microphones remain muted and join us for worship.
As we prepare our hearts and minds for worship, hear these words of Henri Nouwen, who said, quote, "Each day holds a surprise, but only if we expect it can we see, hear, or feel it when it comes to us. Let us not be afraid to receive each day's surprise, whether it comes to us as a sorrow or as joy. It will open a new place in our hearts, a place where we can welcome now our new friends and celebrate more fully our shared humanity." Unquote. May it be so.
Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me, that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time. Come dream a dream with me. Come dream a dream with me. Come dream a dream with me, that I know your mind. And I'll bring you when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time. Come walk in rain with me. Come walk in rain with me. Come walk in rain with me, that I know your mind. And I'll bring you when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time. Come share a rose with me. Come share a rose with me. Come share a rose with me, that I know your mind. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time.
Have a personal chalice or candle near your computer. Please get ready to light it. We invite you to type into the chat box where your chalice is lit, the street or neighborhood, or what city if you're joining us from outside Boulder County. Now I'd like to invite Diana Maiden to light this morning's chalice.
Good morning, beloved community. I hope you are all staying warm on this very chilly Valentine's Day. Earlier today, I cranked up the furnace and bundled up in multiple layers as my coffee brewed. My 2 young kittens sought me out for laps, guaranteed warmth for both of us, or they planted themselves atop the heat vents for a direct blast of hot air. We living creatures find many ways to meet this common need for warmth, for connection. This month's theme of beloved community reminds me that just as we seek physical warmth in response to cold, we also seek community to bind us together as part of a human experience. But if it were only as easy as turning up the furnace and bundling in our favorite sweater or leaping on a welcoming lap. There is a wonderful quote from this month's Unitarian Universalist packet on beloved community. From the teacher, activist, and pastor, Henri Nouwen. He notes that beloved community, quote, is the place where the person you least want to live with always lives. That person is always in your community somewhere. In the eyes of others, you might be that person. That stings a bit. Just as we think of the warmth and acceptance we seek in beloved community, we are reminded that beloved community is not a static state of peace and acceptance, but rather can contain within its vastness discord and discomfort, at times possibly generated by ourselves. Henri Nouwen also notes that we may resist fully committing to beloved community because we lack trust, that we quietly know our own imperfections and fear that if we show up as our real selves, beloved community will fade and not be there for us. So I light this chalice this morning with the promise that I will trust and actively seek to engage with this beloved community, to understand that we are within a living process where we can work together to create more justice and love in this world. And we can start here.
We now invite all those gathered in your various locations to join together in fellowship and community as we all say aloud our congregation's covenant. We gather in fellowship to speak truth to each other, to reach out and touch one another, to care with each other, and to seek the truth divine. So be it.
Thank you, Janet and Diana, for getting us started with all those lovely words. When we gather, as we do on Sundays, as we reconnect with each other and our beloved community, we also take a moment of pause to tune into our own joys and concerns. So let's do that now. Let's quiet our minds, still our bodies, and just get in touch with what is on our mind and in our hearts in this present moment. In the quiet of your own thoughts, I invite you to lift up all that weighs on you: grief, anxieties, frustrations, and loss. Whatever it is, let us hold this and each other in silence. And let us turn our minds and our hearts to those we love, imagining them in our minds, holding them with love, acknowledging their painful challenges and sufferings, and sharing a bit of our love with them. And I invite you to share your concerns in the chat box so that we, your community of love, can hold them with you. I'll name some, others I may leave for now. But please, now is the time to share our concerns. I know we're concerned for those who don't have warmth on these cold, cold days and nights. I know we hold concern for our democracy and its ability to hold those in power accountable. Diane is reminding us to send love to the Caliphus family, absolutely holding them in our hearts. Gratitude for our partners on this day of love. Those suffering still from this pandemic, whether it be a suffering of health or of isolation or of continuing to put your body on the line as a frontline worker, emergency worker, we give love and thanks to all who are struggling with these impossible situations. Yeah, there's a lot of losses going on here, losses of loved ones and friends, losses of possibilities and reunions. Sending love to my friend Dalbeth, who's spending his first Valentine's Day without his wife, knowing that he is surrounded by so many more who love him. Yes, I've heard of this terrible news as well of teen overdoses in Boulder due to fentanyl. For all those families and those who love those who we have lost, dealing with that impossible moment. And for those who are not finding shelter in this cold. Please continue to post. Let it keep flowing as you need. We offer our love and our witness to all those who are suffering. But let me also invite you to bring into your minds, to bring into your hearts, and to bring into the chat those things for which you are grateful and are bringing you joy. We must celebrate. I'm not normally that into Valentine's Day, but I'll take any excuse to celebrate right now. So please share. I will start with this wonderful joy that we can all celebrate. Tom and Karina are celebrating that today, February 14th, marks the exact 5-year anniversary of when they first met here at UUCB. This is a love story we're all a part of. They got married at UUCB 2.5 years ago and are so happy to be a part of this wonderful community that brought them together. Oh, look at all these lovely wishes lighting up our chat now too. For flowers sent by loved ones. The joy of connecting with friends and family on Zoom. Deborah, our beloved music director, says, best Valentine's Day ever for me. And I sure love hearing that. Yeah, we'll all share that love today. That's right, Catherine. Thankful for family and friends, for warmth, for grandchildren, beloved partners. I love being reminded of all that love. So thank you so much. 23 years since our last house move from Gary and Babs. Yes, as someone who's moved more times than I'd like to admit, that is a joy. Good for you. Keep them coming for all these blessings and concerns, as well as those that remain silently on our hearts. We hold this compassionate space with love. And I thank you all for the ways that you bless each other in this world.
Prior to the service today, we asked you to find 3 things that remind you of a good memory, or a spiritual ancestor, or a place that you recollect. And keep these things nearby during the service. It could be a keepsake, a photo, a piece of jewelry, a figurine, and so forth. If you haven't found 3 things yet, no problem. We'll be giving you a little time to look for them soon. These 3 things are step 1 towards building your own personal worship space, an altar customized just for you. It's a way to make virtual church feel just a bit more real. Here's a slideshow of altars that Reverend Jeremy and others built. We would love to add a picture of your altar to this slideshow, so check the church messenger for details. You can build an altar in a corner of your house, on a tabletop, or even on a tray, so it's portable. Include items that signify something meaningful about you: family, work, travels, spiritual journeys. You can add or change items anytime. Invite members of your family to contribute items. Get your kids involved. Now here's Diana Maiden to share what she put in her personal altar.
Hi. So when we talked about a personal altar, I realized I wanted to be surrounded by the people and things that I love during the service time, and reminded of the generations of folks who have come before me, some of whom were Unitarians, and then other things that I value and that express my perspective. So one of the items, and I think you can actually see it right here in the slideshow, but it's a little Buddha. It's only about 2.5 inches tall. But the reason I love this one in particular is that the mudra, hand position of this Buddha is called the earth touching mudra. And it acknowledges that through our senses, we know ourselves and we know the world. And it is where we are grounded. And then another item that is one I inherited. I never met my mother's father, my grandfather, but he was a woodworker. And one of the few things I have of his is this beautiful wooden goblet, and it is as thin as glass. It's a remarkable piece, so I can connect to his sense of beauty and his skill. And then I do include pictures of family, in particular my mother, Elizabeth Holzer, Maiden. And also, to keep me grounded with my own children, I have this little storyteller, Native American storyteller. And there are 2 young girls sitting on her lap. And it reminds me very much of the time I spent with my children, especially when they were young and we were learning about life together. So those were all things that I included in my personal altar. And it shape shifts. Sometimes I take things out and put new things in. So there's a lot of freedom in how you do this. And I used a cardboard that I kind of shaped like the Globe Theater from Shakespeare's era, and then did a montage of pictures and cards on that. And then it provided a shelf as well. So I hope you enjoy building your own altar. There are no rules.
Thank you, Diana, for sharing. That is such a beautiful altar. So now we're going to play some music so you can take time to search for your 3 memorable things, or if you have them with it, or if you have the things with you or visualized, please enter in the chat what you want to include in your personal worship space, in your personal altar. Thank you for sharing your many wonderful ultra mementos in the chat. Today's reading is by John Irving from A Prayer for Owen Meany. Your memory is a monster. You forget. It doesn't. It simply files things away. It keeps things for you or hides things from you and summons them to your recall with a will of its own. You think you have a memory, but it has you.
Midnight, not a sound from the pavement. Has the moon lost her memory? She is smiling alone. In the lamplight, the withered leaves collect at my feet, and the wind begins to moan. Memory, all alone in the moonlight, I can smile at the old days. I was beautiful then. I remember the time I knew what happiness was. Let the memory live again. Every street lamp seems to beat a fatalistic warning. Someone mutters and a street lamp gutters, and soon it will be morning. Daylight, I must wait for the sunrise. I must think of a new life, and I mustn't give in. When the dawn comes, tonight will be a memory too, and a new day will begin. Burnt out ends of smoky days, the cold smell of morning. The street lamp dies, another night is over, another day is dawning. Touch me, it's so easy to leave me all alone with the memory of my days in the sun. If you touch me, you'll understand what happiness is. Look, a new day
Mm. Wow. Thank you, Deborah. Really wonderful to have you back and reminding me exactly how much I miss live music. It's beautiful. The life and times of the Greek goddess of memory, Mnemosyne, is perhaps ironically not well recorded by history. What little we are told is that the goddess memory is the daughter of Uranus and Gaia, the god of sky and goddess Mother Earth herself. So Mnemosyne, memory, is literally the result of the coupling of earth and sky. She ends up having 9 little children with Zeus, who become the 9 muses: poetry, history, mime, flute, dance, song, tragedy, comedy, and astronomy. These 9 muses, the daughters of memory, are meant to represent the efforts by early humans to preserve history, to save the stories of the past from being forgotten. Because memories are really just the stories we remember to keep telling. And the muses were the mnemonics of our ancient ancestors. If a story was to be remembered, it had to be turned into an epic poem or story, set to music and regaled in song, or turned into a play, so that it would be imprinted on those who were not there, and thus not be forgotten and lost to history. And this metaphor that memory is like physically imprinting stories on the brain dominated our understanding of how we remembered things for much of human history. Plato, for example, posited that memories were imprinted on wax blocks stored in our heads. And although this idea is in many ways still with us as a symbol for how we think memory works, we now know pretty definitively that this is not at all the case. As researcher Rosalind Cartwright relates in her book, The Science of Dreams, quote, "Memory is never a precise duplicate of the original. It is a continuing act of creation," unquote. If imprinting on the brain is the old metaphor, it is this well-articulated thought from Dr. Cartwright that memory is a continuing act of creation that I ask you to hold on to as we explore the topic of our memories this morning. Now, I'm sure that everyone has experienced that moment when you've gathered with old friends or family and begun to tell favorite stories from the past, and quickly come to realize that many of you have different memories of significant plot points. Some people may even seem to remember themselves right into stories that they were never really in the first place. And these people would perhaps even swear on their life that they were there. They remember it. And how could their memory be wrong? Well, as author Jonah Lehrer wrote, quote, "The biggest lie of human memory is that it feels true," unquote. It feels true, but so often is not. In fact, perhaps the world expert on how memory really works, a professor of psychology and law at UC Irvine named Elizabeth Loftus, says that, quote, "Just because someone thinks they remember something in detail, with confidence and with emotion, does not mean that it actually happened. False memories have these same characteristics too," unquote. So what's going on here? To better understand how our memory really works, let's dive into Professor Loftus' work for a moment. After getting her PhD from Stanford in 1970, she received a grant from the US government Department of Transportation to study the way people remember and report their memories of auto accidents. You can imagine the implications for insurance companies who are trying to sort out what happened at an accident scene, who's at fault, and most importantly, who pays, and who gets paid. And what Loftus quickly discovered was that the reports of witnesses were very easy to manipulate based on how she phrased questions. For instance, if she asked how fast a car was going when it hit another car, she got, on average, an answer that was 7 miles per hour less than if she asked how fast the car was going when it smashed another car. Clearly, the memories of the witnesses reacted differently to the words hit and smash, increasing the speed of the car in their minds when a more active word was used. And further, she could not just manipulate the memory in the sense of expanding or contracting something that already existed. She could quite easily insert entirely new details. For example, after viewing a film of an accident, if asked if the witness saw a broken headlight, the answer was no. But if they were asked if they saw the broken headlight, they were very likely to answer yes, when in fact there was no broken headlight. But merely the feeling of the question switching from the less directive, did you see a broken headlight, to the more directive, did you see the broken headlight, was all it took to add an entirely new feature into the memory that was held as confidently as any other piece. She began to wonder how far she could take this and decided to turn her attention and research towards criminal trials, where more than just insurance payouts were on the line, but rather people's lives and freedoms. Here is one example of what she found. First, she would show someone a set of 6 faces while she told them about a crime, and then identify one of the faces as the perpetrator and 5 as innocent. Then, 3 days later, she would show 4 faces to that same person, one of an innocent person from the previous group, and then 3 new faces. In this situation, just short of 2/3 of the participants in the study fingered the innocent person that they recognized from days earlier as the perpetrator, stating with certainty that they remembered it to be them. That is to say, almost 2/3 recognized the one familiar face and leapt to insert it back into the story as the criminal. You can imagine that criminal defense attorneys love her, and she has indeed testified in many celebrity trials, including Michael Jackson's in that famous O.J. Simpson trial. Her studies go on, but you get the idea by now. Memory is not an imprinting in the sense of videotape that captures a fixed set of events and plays them back over and over just the same, but is rather a continuing act of creation, involving only a loose relationship with the original event and owing at least as much to the context of the moment of recall. The reason you are trying to remember, the way you are asked about it, the mood you are in at the time you are diving back into your mind, all will have as great an impact as the facts of the original event. That is how trustworthy and solid our memory really is. And in many ways, this can be unsettling. Our memories are so essential to how we think of who we are. So what does it mean that they're so much less reliable than we assume? I think one possible answer is that it can actually be very freeing. Because as much as memories help us know who we are, they also can trap us in who we are and make it very difficult to become who we wish to be. But if the truth is that memory is not a permanent imprint, but is rather a continuing act of creation, then there's no reason they should ever stop us from becoming. Just because we remember our childhood a certain way, or what happened the last time we tried to better ourselves, or think we know how good we are at something because of a stuck memory from our past, doesn't mean that has to be the end of it. Because a memory is really just a story you tell yourself, and every story can be changed. Not only can it be changed, but it turns out it's being changed constantly, for better or for worse. and our only choice is whether to get involved or not. So, what do I mean by getting involved? What would it really look like for us to be free from those stuck memories? Luckily for us, Northwestern professor Dan Adams believes he knows the answer. Professor Adams has spent 30 years studying life stories because he believes of all of our memories, the ones related to our life story are the most tenderly curated collections, the most essential to who we are, or as he puts it, quote, the stories we tell ourselves about our lives don't just shape our personalities, they are our personalities, unquote. But of course, your life story is not a telling of everything that's happened to you since birth, but rather it's kind of like the Cliff Notes version of your life that you tell yourself, which he calls a cognitive script. And it helps us answer those big questions as best we can. How we got to be the person we are and what direction we are trying to take our lives. Quote, these aren't just separate things and have an influence on who we are, says McAdams. They are, to a certain extent, who we are, and they're integrated into our personality as a kind of narrative feature of individuality, unquote. And further, he claims that by gaining a deeper understanding of how we create our narrative script, then we can actually intentionally alter it. And as I hinted at previously, thereby freeing ourselves from parts of our past that are hindering us from moving forward, from more fully becoming who we are meant to be. So I'm going to share two of the main concepts at the center of this growing field called narrative psychology. And the first is the idea that not only is your story constantly evolving, but that as you age, there is a clearly discernible trend towards positive self-storytelling. We begin creating our cognitive scripts right around the time we enter kindergarten. And as will most likely not surprise anyone, they continue to grow in depth and especially in drama as they approach the teen years, and we start to engage with those big, anxious questions about meaning and purpose. In our 20s and 30s, all kinds of new ideas and characters are added to our script, but this usually peaks sometime in our 40s, and the story begins to move in the opposite direction, towards simplicity and integration. Quote, there is some research to suggest that the complexity of narratives peaks out in someone's 40s, maybe early 50s, says McAdams. Then you get a tendency to simplify a little bit. If you look at people in midlife and later, their stories tend to be a little bit softer and gentler and happier. There's an improvement over time. When people get older, they seem to have less tolerance for that. They'll kind of reconstruct the past and forget or downplay the bad stuff a little bit, unquote. So that is tip number one. You are eventually going to give yourself permission to downplay the bad stuff. So why not get a head start now? And if you're already there, why not do a little more? And the second learning from narrative psychology was found when McAdams studied people in their 30s and 40s who fell into a category he called generative people, which he defined as being caring, productive, and committed to being a positive force in the world, the kinds of people most of us aspire to be. With all the life stories of these people that he studied, he found the same thing. They all included a strong redemptive arc. All of these people had met with epic failures, disappointments, heartbreaks, and disasters. They had started failed businesses. They had been divorced from a spouse or fired from their dream job. But when they told these stories as essential components of their script, it was to show how they had used these moments as a catalyst to what they were now, not to dwell on things that prevented them from getting to their goals. It's such a classic genre of life script that we all know the arc well. It is the basis for every Lifetime movie and VH1 Behind the Music special. Failure leads to success if we decide to keep trying. Quote, we all know how to do that, and many of us do it, but the highly generative people do it a lot, says McAdams. They have about twice as many of those themes in their life stories or more as do the rest of us, unquote. Twice as many. So that means that each of us needs to work maybe twice as hard to work on those failure stories we carry, as they are some of the most important to how we see ourselves. We need to see them as part of our learning, as the beginning of our arc and not the end. I think most of us sense intuitively that this is true, but this is empirical evidence that backs it up. Failure, pain, and heartbreak will come to us all. But what story will we tell ourselves about that moment? That's up to you, and it matters a whole lot how you answer that question. And so that is what I hope you leave here today thinking about. That your memories are not set in stone, and they do not own you or control your future. Your memories are, just like you, a work in progress, a continuing act of creation. Your memories will always be a shifting tide of then and now. So why not engage with those memories? Why not take an active role in the curation of your inner life and assign meaning as fits your life needs? Earlier, in the meditative ritual that Janet and Diana led us in, we practiced one very practical way of intentionally curating our memories by beginning to create a personal altar full of good energy and beautiful memories. But you are also encouraged to do something similar within, to take some time before you fall asleep at night or on your morning walk or while you meditate to begin to rework your memories to serve you better. Because memory is an ongoing act of creation. So you might as well play along. May it be. May it be so. Ashe.
This month, we share our offering plate with EFAA, the Emergency Family Assistance Association. In addition to providing safety net supports such as food and financial assistance, EFAA is the leading provider of housing for homeless families in Boulder County. Here is Cynthia's story, written by her. Before COVID-19, we were finally able to feel like we were becoming secure after being displaced with no home, both being able to have a job and reliable childcare. As soon as the beginning of the pandemic started, I began to feel its pressure. Hours getting shortened, having to organize when and what we could pay. Reality really began to set in when I had to go from being a working mom to a teacher and being a full-time stay-at-home mom. It was a struggle, but with the help of her teachers, it became a normal routine. Our daughter is high risk due to her asthma and other underlying health conditions, so being precautious was the best thing for all of us. My husband began to feel the struggles when working his job. It was warehouse work. They started getting cases of COVID-19 within the facility. He went from making $20+ an hour and overtime 6 to 7 days a week to only being able to bring home a $300 check. We found a lot of people and resources to help us, and we had to make drastic decisions on how much we were going to spend on everything. Food banks have become my best friend. My husband had to find another job. It is nowhere quite as much money as the warehouse. A lot has happened during this pandemic, but more than anything, it has shown me the strength we have as community can get us through anything. Though this may be a trying time, I'm glad that we are part of EFAA's program. Knowing how to manage a budget and knowing that our management and everyone else is behind us has made this journey just a little less bumpier. You can make a donation now using the link posted in our chat, by sending a check to UUCB or scanning the QR code on the next slide with your mobile phone. Please be as generous as you can. We will now receive the offering. May our gifts be used to enact justice, bringing peace and love to the Boulder community.
You gotta do what the Spirit says do. You gotta do what the Spirit says do. When the Spirit says do, you gotta do, Lord. You gotta do when the Spirit says do. 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 You gotta sing when the Spirit says sing. You gotta sing when the Spirit says sing. When the Spirit says sing, you gotta sing. Oh, you gotta sing when the Spirit says sing. Spirit says do. Spirit says do. Spirit says do. Spirit says do. Spirit says do.
As we extinguish our chalices and prepare our hearts and minds to return to the world, hear these words of Christian reformer and author Lewis B. Smedes, who wrote that, quote, "Forgiving does not erase the bitter past. A healed memory is not a deleted memory. Instead, forgiving what we cannot forget creates a new way to remember. We change the memory of our past into a hope for our future," unquote. May we be so brave. Ashe.
Go your way in peace, wander as you may. Blessed is the path you take, may love guide you on your way. Go your way in peace, wander as you may. Blessed is the path you take, may love guide you on your way.
We invite you to stay with us in our Zoom rooms for a time of online fellowship and discussion. Our Zoom lobby focus today is YBIL, Your Board is Listening, led by Chris Zanoni. Barb and Fred are here to tell us how this is going to work.
You better remember this day. Hi, I'm Fred Cole.
I'm Barb Richards, sending tons of warmth to everybody.
And this is the wild woman I was referring